Coming up on Checkpoint, 10 people are in hospital in Christchurch after smoking a dodgy batch of synthetic cannabis. We'll have the latest on the Whitsunday shark attacks in Australia, and Aurora Energy CEO fires a warning shot to staff. But we begin just one day on from Housing New Zealand's pledge to compensate out-of-pocket tenants booted from their homes over dodgy meth testing. Tonight, Checkpoint can exclusively reveal that some might not be eligible at all. The CEO of Housing New Zealand, Andrew Mackenzie, told Checkpoint this afternoon that people who had rented their Housing New Zealand homes through third-party agents such as iwi may not be eligible for compensation from Housing New Zealand. But that's not correct, according to at least one agency we've spoken to. So who is right, who's responsible, and who should pay up? I asked Andrew Mackenzie why he made yesterday's apology and commitment.
We moved people out of homes where there was evidence of contamination from methamphetamine use. We used a standard which was too low and is now acknowledged to be too low, and then we didn't rehouse them. We're trying to take a fair and reasonable approach and provide this assistance to people who could not afford the costs that were imposed on them by moving out of their homes and by having, in some cases, to destroy goods.
Also yesterday, we visited Rima Herbert, who, with his wife Pauline, cares for his 3 grandchildren. The couple was evicted back in 2016 following an extensive contamination report that stated the house should not be tenanted and that surfaces and materials in the house were contaminated. Rima told us he's still out of pocket after paying to clean the house and having thrown away most of his possessions, which he estimated cost about $15,000. He said it was a highly stressful time, and it's disappointing that compensation for hurt and humiliation isn't also being considered.
I got an assistance from WINS, and they paid for the hotel. Obviously, I have to pay that back, which I'm still doing at the moment. But there's costs like removing the furniture. Now, in the report, it says that the furniture's contaminated, we should get rid of it. So, you know, there's a high cost to that. And so who's responsible for that?
Who is responsible for that? Housing New Zealand says despite owning the property, commissioning and paying for the methamphetamine report, which clearly stated the house shouldn't be tenanted, it's not necessarily responsible. Last night, after we aired Rima's story, we received a phone call from Housing New Zealand telling us the Herberts wouldn't be eligible for compensation because they rented the house from Ruapōtaka Marae Incorporated Society, who in turn rented from the owner, Housing New Zealand. Here's Andrew Mackenzie again.
So as the building owner, we may have tested for them, but they were the organisation that made the decision that they needed to test the property based on that evidence. We warned them about it, and obviously given our scale as an organisation, we were able to organise for that testing to occur. But the decision as to what happened to Mr Herbert, the decision to ask him to leave the home, that was made by them, given that they were the landlord for Mr Herbert.
So you are saying you did not, as Housing New Zealand, you did not evict Rima Herbert and his family?
We did not evict Rima Herbert and his family.
Will Rima Herbert be getting compensation?
So this is an interesting case for us. It's one, as I've said to you, we're going to take a case-by-case basis. Mr Herbert has been in contact with us, so we will look at the circumstances. But it's important to understand that landlords right across New Zealand were affected by the guidelines.
Yes, but what we're talking about here, Andrew, I'm sorry, with respect, I need to make this very, very specific here, Andrew, and that is that we are talking about Housing New Zealand. That's why we've got you on the program. And I want to know how many, I'm sorry, Andrew, but I've just got to ask this question because it's not just Rima we're worried about here. We're worried about all the people that are in Rima and his family's situation. How many other people held a tenancy with someone other than Housing New Zealand when you owned the property? How many other people are in that category?
So can I just, I think it is important that your audience understand this. All landlords were affected by the guidelines as to what was a safe and healthy house to live in. And the Tenancy Tribunal was using those guidelines to determine whether or not a landlord was liable to pay damages for putting people into a home that was unsafe.
Checkpoint visited Ruapōtaka Marae today, where management confirmed it did not request or pay for the meth testing to be done. We understand Ruapōtaka Marae recommends tenants for Housing New Zealand, but is not the landlord. Checkpoint has a copy of the test report, one of many that has since been found to have applied unreasonable thresholds for meth levels. It is addressed only to Housing New Zealand's Chemical Requests team and has a HNZ reference number. So things were not looking good for the Herberts, and who knows how many others who were also evicted and had a level of middle management between them and Housing New Zealand. But when we called Rima this morning, he told us Housing New Zealand had called him earlier in the day, and this is what he was told.
She was explaining that she was going to be like our case manager, and she'll deal with our case. We were top priority. And then she laid out some stuff that it could take a number of weeks to get it all sorted out. So I said to her that, look, our conversation should be recorded in terms of by way of email.
Housing New Zealand did follow up with an email which states he's been assigned for individual consideration for HNZ's assistance package. So who was the Herberts' landlord? And who is responsible for compensating them? The Ruapōtaka Marae Incorporated Society says it's not them, and Andrew Mackenzie says it's not Housing New Zealand.
In terms of houses that we lease to community group organisations, and we lease around 3,000 houses to community group organisations, and ranging from women's refuge through trusts associated with integrating people coming out of jail into the community, through to the iwi-based trust which Mr Herbert was in, there's about 3,000 properties. Those landlords are responsible for the behaviour of the tenants that they choose to put in those homes.
As I said before, what we're looking at here are the houses and this very policy that you've come out yesterday saying is that you're acting with goodwill, that you're looking for a fair and decent approach here. I want to know how many people are in Rima's situation where it's a Housing New Zealand owned house, and it seems from the tone that you're giving us now that they may not be eligible for being out of pocket just like anyone else was who was evicted.
So to be very clear to you, what we've said is we will look at each individual circumstance, but it is very important to understand we are not responsible for the decisions that those other organisations make.
At this stage, it's unclear where this leaves Rima and his family and whether they'll be compensated at all. If we get to speak to Housing New Zealand, if you were able to sit down at a table with the boss of Housing New Zealand, what's your message? What would you have to say?
Get your act together and, and carry out the duties that you're supposed to be doing.
That's Rima Herbert. I spoke to him earlier today. That's his message for Housing New Zealand. As you could hear in that package, we did not get the information yet from Housing New Zealand, from Andrew Mackenzie, about how many people are in Rima's situation. We will find that out for you and let you know, for your sake and for his. We went to Phil Twyford, the Minister of Housing. He would not comment today, saying it was an operational matter for Housing New Zealand. Obviously much more to come on this. Stay tuned to Checkpoint.